The silence in space was broken by a weak signal crackling through the communication system of the exploration vessel Wanderer. Captain Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and leaned forward in his command chair. 3 months of routine patrol along the outer rim had made him and his crew restless. Nothing ever happened out here in the empty sectors between civilized worlds. "Captain, we're picking up a distress beacon," said Lieutenant Sam Parker from the communications station. His young face showed concern as he adjusted the frequency controls. "It's coming from the Kepler 442 system. The signal is faint, but it's definitely a Valari emergency code." Morrison straightened up. The Valari were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. In all his years of service, he had never heard of a Valari ship sending out a distress call. These tall, graceful beings looked like deer walking on 2 legs with soft brown fur and large, gentle eyes. They spent their time growing beautiful gardens and creating medicines that could heal almost any wound. They didn't fight wars or get into trouble. "How far out are we?" Morrison asked. 2 days at maximum speed, sir," replied Navigator Jenny Mills from her station near the front of the bridge. Morrison didn't hesitate. "Set course for Kepler 442c immediately. Maximum speed." The Wanderer changed direction, and its engines roared to life. As they traveled through space, Morrison couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The Valari lived on peaceful farming worlds. What could possibly threaten them? 2 days later, they arrived at Kepler 442c. What they saw made Morrison's blood run cold. The planet's surface showed massive scorch marks visible even from orbit. Smoke rose from several locations across the main continent. The beautiful crystal cities the Valari were famous for building looked like broken glass scattered across the landscape. "Captain, I'm detecting life signs," reported Science Officer Pete Davis. "But they're weak and scattered. Most of the major settlements appear to be destroyed." Morrison gripped the arms of his chair. "Take us down. Landing site coordinates to the largest remaining settlement." The Wanderer descended through the planet's atmosphere. As they got closer to the surface, the damage became more obvious. Great claw marks had been carved into the ground, some so deep they looked like small canyons. Buildings lay in ruins, their crystal walls shattered and melted. Strange burn patterns covered everything, as if some terrible fire had swept across the land. They landed near what had once been a thriving Valari city. Now only a few buildings still stood, and even those were badly damaged. Morrison and his team put on their protective suits and stepped outside. The air smelled of smoke and something else, something that made Morrison's skin crawl with fear. "Spread out and look for survivors," Morrison ordered. "Stay in radio contact at all times." They didn't have to search long. Behind a collapsed crystal tower, they found a group of Valari huddled together. There were maybe 20 of them, including some injured ones lying on makeshift beds. When they saw the humans approaching, the Valari looked up with their large, sad eyes filled with hope and terror. An elderly Valari with silver fur stepped forward. Morrison recognized him as an elder by the intricate patterns painted on his forehead. The being spoke in the common galactic language, his voice shaking with emotion. "Humans," the elder said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Thank the stars. You have come. I am Thessarian, elder of the Southern Valley peoples. We sent the distress call hoping someone would hear us before they return." Morrison removed his helmet to show respect. "I am Captain Morrison of the Earth vessel Wanderer. What happened here? Who did this to your people?" Thessarian's large eyes filled with tears that looked like liquid crystal. "The shadow maws," he whispered, and several other Valari made soft, crying sounds. They came in the night 3 days ago. We had no warning, no time to prepare. Morrison felt his stomach drop. Shadow maws were the stuff of nightmares, creatures that even the toughest alien warriors feared. They were massive predators, nearly 12 feet tall when standing upright, covered in black scales that seemed to absorb light. Their claws could cut through almost any material, and their bite could crush steel. Most terrifying of all, they were intelligent. They hunted not just for food but for sport. But shadow maws don't usually attack settlements, Morrison said, trying to understand. They prefer to hunt lone travelers or small groups. The Sarian's expression became even more pained. They did not come just to kill us, Captain Morrison. They came for our young ones. They took our children alive. The words hit Morrison like a physical blow. They took your children? Why? To their breeding grounds, the Sarian explained, his voice breaking. In the crimson valleys on the dark side of our moon. They keep live prey there to train their own young ones to hunt. Our children are being held in cages, waiting to be released as practice targets for shadow maw cubs. Lieutenant Parker, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. How many children did they take? 47, the Sarian said. 47 of our youngest and most innocent. They range in age from 5 to 15 in your human years. They are so frightened, so far from home. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. The idea of children being used as living training targets for predators made him sick. How long do we have? The shadow maws follow a schedule, the Sarian explained. They will keep the children for 7 days to let fear make them more challenging prey. Today is the 4th day. In 3 more days, they will begin the hunting lessons. Science Officer Davis spoke up. Captain, the Crimson Valleys are some of the most dangerous terrain in this sector. The Shadow Maw breeding grounds are supposed to be impregnable. Even the Galactic Council's military forces won't go near them. Morrison looked at the group of surviving Valari. They were gentle creatures who had probably never hurt anything in their entire lives. Their children were being held prisoner by the most feared predators in the galaxy, and in 3 days those children would die in the most horrible way possible. We need to contact the Galactic Council immediately, Morrison decided. This is beyond our capabilities. We'll need a full military response. The Sarian nodded sadly. We understand, Captain Morrison. We know the chances are small, but thank you for trying. Your presence here gives us hope. As Morrison looked around at the devastated city and the traumatized survivors, he made a silent promise. Somehow, some way, those Valari children would be rescued, even if it meant going up against the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. The massive space station that served as the headquarters for the Galactic Council floated in the neutral zone between 3 star systems. Its gleaming white surface reflected the light from nearby stars, making it look like a small moon. Inside, its halls, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered for what everyone knew would be a difficult meeting. Ambassador Lisa Chen walked quickly through the corridors toward the emergency session chamber. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her formal diplomatic uniform showed she meant business. As Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, she had dealt with many crises over the years, but nothing quite like this. The chamber was already filling up when she arrived. She took her seat in the section reserved for newer council members. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years, which made them practically babies compared to some species that had been here for thousands of years. At you. The center of the chamber stood Chancellor Mordak, a tall, blue-skinned Zenthari whose large head housed one of the most powerful brains in the galaxy. His species could read minds and control thoughts, making them natural diplomats and leaders. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber using both sound and telepathy. "Fellow council members," Chancellor Mordak began, "we face a grave situation. The peaceful Valari settlement on Kepler 442c has been attacked by shadow maws. 47 Valari children have been taken to the Crimson Valley breeding grounds and face certain death in 3 days unless we act." A murmur of concern rippled through the chamber. The Valari were beloved by all species for their gentle nature and their medical advances that had saved countless lives across the galaxy. The first to speak was General Korthak of the Corvin Empire. The Corvin looked like giant armored insects, and they had the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Their weapons could destroy entire planets, and their soldiers were trained from birth to be perfect warriors. The Corvin Empire sympathizes with the Valari tragedy, General Korthak said, his voice coming through a mechanical translator. However, the Crimson Valleys are defended by at least 300 adult shadow maws. Even our most advanced battle units would suffer massive casualties. The risk is too great for the potential gain. Lisa Chen felt her heart sink. If the mighty Corvin wouldn't help, who would? Next to speak was Wisdom Keeper Thalnos of the Axiom Coalition. The Axiom were beings of pure energy who had technology so advanced it seemed like magic. Their ships could travel across the galaxy in minutes, and their weapons could reshape matter at the atomic level. The Axiom Coalition has run probability calculations, Thalnos said, his form flickering like a blue flame. The chance of a successful rescue mission is approximately 0.3%. The Shadow Maw breeding grounds are located in a natural fortress of crystal formations that our energy weapons cannot penetrate without causing avalanches that would kill the prisoners. We cannot justify the risk to our personnel for such a low probability of success. The chamber filled with disappointed murmurs. If beings with godlike technology said it was impossible, what hope was there? High Priestess Valdara of the Seraphim. Collective stood next. The Seraphim were tall, elegant beings with 4 arms and wings of pure light. They were known for their wisdom and their ability to inspire others with their words. The Seraphim grieve for the Valari children. Valdara said, her musical voice touching every heart in the chamber. Our spirit warriors are brave beyond measure and would gladly give their lives for these innocents. However, our greatest power lies in inspiring courage in others. The Shadow Maws are immune to our emotional influences. We would be sending our people to die for nothing. More species spoke, and each had the same answer. The telepathic Zenthari couldn't read Shadow Maw minds because the creatures had natural mental shields. The shape-shifting polymorphs couldn't disguise themselves as Shadow Maws because the predators could smell the difference. The time-manipulating Chronarch said even slowing down time wouldn't help because Shadow Maws were simply too fast and too strong. As the last speaker finished, Chancellor Mordak looked around the chamber with sad eyes. It appears we have reached a consensus. While we all wish to help the Valari children, the mission is simply too dangerous and too unlikely to succeed. We will send medical aid and resources to help the Valari rebuild, but we cannot risk more lives in a hopeless rescue. Attempt! Lisa Chen stood up before the session could be officially ended. Chancellor Mordak, may I speak? The blue-skinned leader nodded. Of course, Ambassador Chen. Earth's voice is always welcome here. Lisa looked around the chamber at all the powerful species that had just given up on 47 innocent children. I understand the tactical concerns that each of you has raised. The Shadow Maws are indeed formidable opponents, and the Crimson Valleys are a natural fortress. However, I request permission to consult with my government before we consider this. Matter closed. General Korthak made a clicking sound that his translator rendered as laughter. Ambassador Chen, humans are brave, but you lack the technology of the Axiom, the strength of the Corvin, or the mental powers of the Zenthari. What could your species possibly do that we cannot? Lisa smiled slightly. Perhaps nothing, General. But humans have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. We've learned that sometimes the impossible just takes a little longer. Chancellor Mordak studied her with his large, intelligent eyes. Very well, Ambassador Chen. You have 24 hours to present an alternative proposal. If Earth can suggest a viable plan, we will reconvene to discuss it. After the session ended, Lisa Chen walked quickly to her private communications chamber. She activated a secure channel back to Earth and waited for the signal to connect. When Admiral Ryan Burke's weathered face appeared on the screen, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Admiral, we have a situation, she began, and quickly explained everything that had happened. Burke listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So let me get this straight, Burke finally said. Every major power in the galaxy says it's impossible to rescue these kids? That's correct, Lisa confirmed. Burke's face broke into a grim smile. Lisa, you know what we humans do when everyone else says something is impossible? Lisa felt a spark of hope. We prove them wrong? Damn right we do, Burke said. Give me 12 hours. I think I know just the person for this job. As the communication ended, Lisa Chen felt something that the other species in the chamber had lost. Hope. Throughout human history, when faced with impossible odds, humans had done the unexpected. They had climbed the highest mountains, crossed the deadliest oceans, and reached for the stars themselves. Maybe, just maybe, that stubborn human refusal to accept defeat would be enough to save 47 innocent children from the most feared predators in the galaxy. Staff Sergeant Alex Rodriguez was knee-deep in swamp water, carefully collecting samples of alien fungi when his communication device buzzed. He ignored it at first. He was finally getting close to understanding how these strange mushrooms could glow in the dark without any visible energy source. After 6 months on the research planet Kepler 438b, he had learned to appreciate the quiet work of xenobiology. The device buzzed again, more insistently this time. Alex sighed and pulled it from his waterproof pouch. The message was marked with the highest priority code, which meant it came directly from Earth Command. That was unusual. Usually his research reports went through 3 different departments before anyone important even looked at them. Rodriguez here, he said, activating the voice channel. Sergeant, this is Admiral Burke. I need you back on the nearest communication station immediately. We have a situation that requires your specific skills. Alex stood up in the swamp. Water dripping from his research gear. Admiral Burke didn't make casual calls to staff sergeants. Something big was happening. Sir, I can be at the station in 4 hours, Alex replied. Make it 2, Burke said, and the connection ended. 4 hours later, Alex was sitting in a small communication room at the research station, staring at Admiral Burke's serious face on the main screen. Next to Burke sat a woman Alex didn't recognize, wearing the formal uniform of a diplomatic officer. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Burke began. "I want you to meet Ambassador Lisa Chen, our representative to the Galactic Council. She's going to explain a situation, and then I'm going to ask you to do something that everyone else in the galaxy thinks is impossible." Alex leaned forward. "I'm listening, sir." Ambassador Chen took over, her voice calm but urgent. "Sergeant, have you ever heard of the Volari?" "Yes, ma'am. They're the peaceful species that creates most of the medical supplies used in this sector. Deer-like beings, very gentle, never hurt anyone." "That's correct. 3 days ago, Shadow Maws attacked their main settlement and captured 47 Volari children. The children are being held in the Crimson Valley breeding grounds as training prey for young Shadow Maws. They have less than 72 hours before the hunting lessons begin." Alex felt his stomach tighten. He had studied Shadow Maws during his military training. They were the boogeyman of the galaxy. 12-foot-tall predators with claws that could cut through steel and jaws that could crush a tank. But using children as training prey was evil beyond anything he had ever heard. "What did the Galactic Council decide to do?" Alex asked. "Nothing," Ambassador Chen said bluntly. "Every major species says the mission is impossible. The Corvan military won't risk their soldiers. The Axiom technology can't penetrate the crystal formations without causing deadly avalanches. The Zenthari telepaths can't affect Shadow Maw minds. Everyone has given up," Admiral Burke spoke up. "But humans don't give up, do we, Sergeant?" Alex looked at both officers on the screen. "Sir, are you asking me to attempt a solo rescue mission against 300 Shadow Maws in their own breeding grounds?" "That's exactly what I'm asking," Burke replied. "You have the highest success rate of any special operations soldier we've ever trained. You completed the Titan infiltration mission that everyone said was suicide. You rescued the research team from the acid storms of Proxima 7 when our best computer models said it couldn't be done. Most importantly, you're a xenobiologist now. You understand alien behavior patterns better than anyone." Alex was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Admiral, I appreciate your confidence, but there's a big difference between sneaking past automated defenses and facing 300 of the galaxy's most dangerous predators." "Actually," said Ambassador Chen, "there might not be as big a difference as you think. We've been studying the data from previous Shadow Maw encounters. They're not just mindless killers. They follow very specific behavioral patterns. They hunt at certain times, rest at certain times, and guard their territory according to rigid schedules." Alex's scientific mind started working. "You're saying they're predictable?" "In some ways, yes," Chen continued. "The problem is that every other species sees their predictability as irrelevant because the Shadow Maws are still too strong to fight directly. But what if you didn't have to fight them?" "What are you thinking?" Alex asked. Admiral Burke smiled grimly. "We're thinking that humans have something no other species has, the ability to look at an impossible situation and find a completely different approach. While every other species is focused on how to fight the Shadow Maws, you might find a way to avoid fighting them entirely." Alex stood up and began pacing around the small communication room. His mind raced through everything he knew about Shadow Maws. They were intelligent, but followed instinctual patterns. They were powerful, but relied on fear and intimidation. They were dangerous, but had evolved as ambush predators, not defenders. I would need complete behavioral data on Shadow Maw breeding. "Cycles," Alex said slowly. "Detailed maps of the Crimson Valleys. Information about their daily routines, their guard rotations, their feeding schedules. We can get you everything in our databases," Burke promised, and I would need specialized equipment. Nothing fancy or high-tech. That would just create more ways for things to go wrong. Simple, reliable gear that I know inside and out. Done, Burke said immediately. Alex stopped pacing and looked directly at the screen. Admiral, I need to be completely honest with you. The chances of success are extremely small. If I go in there, I probably won't come back out. I know, Burke replied quietly. That's why I'm not ordering you to do this. I'm asking for a volunteer. Alex thought about the 47 Valari children sitting in cages, waiting to be hunted for sport. He thought about their families, hoping against hope that someone would save them. He thought about the gentle Valari who had never hurt anyone and didn't deserve to lose their children to monsters. Then he thought about what his grandmother used to tell him when he was small. Alex, when bad things happen to good people and everyone else says there's nothing that can be done, that's when ordinary people have to do extraordinary things. I volunteer, Alex said simply. Ambassador Chen smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Sergeant Rodriguez, the Galactic Council is going to think we humans are completely insane. Alex grinned back. Ma'am, that might be exactly the advantage we need. If everyone thinks we're crazy, they won't be able to predict what we'll do next. Admiral Burke nodded approvingly. That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. You have 48 hours to prepare, Sergeant. Use them well. As the communication ended, Alex was already making mental lists of everything he would need. The galaxy's most powerful species had declared the mission impossible, but Alex Rodriguez had learned something during his years as a soldier and a scientist. Impossible just meant that no one had figured out how to do it yet. He was about to show 300 Shadow Maws why humans had earned their reputation as the galaxy's most stubborn and unpredictable species. The stealth shuttle dropped Alex Rodriguez at the edge of the Crimson Valleys just as the larger moon began to set. He watched the small craft disappear into the star-filled sky, knowing it would be the last friendly presence he would see for quite some time. Around him, the landscape looked like something from a nightmare. The Crimson Valleys got their name from the red crystal formations that covered every surface. These crystals had grown over millions of years, creating a maze of sharp spires, deep canyons, and hidden caves. The red color came from iron deposits in the crystal structure, but in the dim light of the moons, everything looked like it was covered in dried blood. Alex adjusted his equipment pack and checked his gear one more time. He carried no energy. Weapons. They would show up on Shadow Maw senses like bright lights in the darkness. Instead, he had simple mechanical tools, climbing gear, and a few devices that every other species would consider primitive. His cloaking system was based on human technology that bent light around him, making him nearly invisible to most forms of detection. He started moving down into the valleys, following the route he had memorized from orbital surveys. Every step had to be careful. The crystal formations were sharp enough to cut through his protective suit, and some of the deeper cracks in the ground went down for hundreds of feet. After 2 hours of careful climbing, Alex got his first glimpse of a real Shadow Maw. The creature was standing guard on a crystal ledge about 50 yards away, and even from that distance, Alex felt his heart start beating faster. The beast was enormous, at least 12 feet tall, covered in black scales that seemed to absorb all light around them. Its claws were as long as Alex's forearm, and its yellow eyes glowed like small suns in the darkness. Alex activated his cloaking device and froze completely still. The Shadow Maw's head turned in his direction, and for a terrifying moment, Alex thought he had been spotted. But after a few seconds, the creature looked away and resumed its patrol pattern. As Alex continued deeper into the valleys, he began to see more shadow maws. They moved with a fluid grace that was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But more importantly, he noticed they followed exact routines. Guard positions were maintained for precisely 1 hour before rotation. Patrol routes never varied, by more than a few feet. Rest periods began and ended at specific times based on the position of the moons overhead. Alex pulled out a small notebook and began mapping their movements. After 6 hours of observation, he could predict where any guard would be at any time. The shadow maws were incredibly dangerous, but they were also creatures of absolute habit. As the night progressed, Alex moved closer to the heart of the breeding grounds. The landscape became even more hostile. Crystal spires stretched hundreds of feet into the air, and the spaces between them were filled with deep shadows where anything could be hiding. Strange sounds echoed through the valleys, the scraping of claws on crystal, low growling that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and occasionally a roar that made Alex's bones vibrate. Just before dawn, Alex reached a high ridge that overlooked the main breeding complex. What he saw below made his blood run cold with anger. The Shadow Maw breeding grounds were built into a natural amphitheater of red crystal. Dozens of cave entrances dotted the walls, connected by narrow ledges and crystal bridges. In the center of the complex was an open area that looked like an arena, surrounded by raised platforms where adult Shadow Maws could watch. But it was the cages that made Alex clench his fists in rage. Scattered throughout the complex were crystalline prisons, each one just large enough to hold 1 or 2 small beings. Alex could see movement in several of the cages. The Valari children were still alive, but they were clearly terrified and exhausted. Alex counted the cages carefully. 47 children, just as reported. They were being held in 3 different areas of the complex, probably divided by age groups. The youngest children were kept closest to the center, surrounded by the most guards. The older children were housed in cages along the outer edges. As Alex watched, young Shadow Maws emerged from the cave entrances. These juveniles were smaller than the adults, only about 8 feet tall, but they moved with the same deadly grace as their parents. Alex realized he was watching a training session. The young Shadow Maws were practicing hunting techniques on crystal formations shaped like various prey animals. An adult Shadow Maw, larger than any Alex had seen before, stood on a central platform overseeing the training. This had to be the breeding alpha, the leader of the entire complex. When it roared commands, all the other Shadow Maws responded immediately. Alex pulled out his binoculars and studied the complex more carefully. The cages were made of the same red crystal as everything else, but they had been shaped and polished until they were nearly transparent. Each cage had a simple mechanical lock, no electronics or energy systems that might interfere with Shadow Maw senses. The guard rotations followed the same pattern Alex had observed throughout the valleys. Adults took 8-hour shifts, while juveniles practiced for 4 hours, then rested for 2 hours. The complex was never completely unguarded, but there were brief moments during shift changes when certain areas had reduced security. Alex spent the entire day hidden on the ridge, mapping guard patterns and studying the layout. He identified 3 possible routes into the complex, 2 emergency escape paths, and the locations of what looked like food storage areas and water sources. As evening approached, Alex noticed increased activity in the complex. Adult shadow maws were gathering on the viewing platforms, and the juveniles were being organized into hunting groups. Alex's heart sank as he realized what he was seeing. A practice hunt was about to begin. A cage containing 2 of the older Valari children was moved into the central arena. The children huddled together, their large eyes wide with terror. Alex could see them shaking even from his distant position. The breeding alpha roared, and the cage door was opened. The 2 children didn't move at first, too frightened to understand they were supposed to run. One of the adult shadow maws made a threatening gesture, and the children finally stumbled out of the cage and ran toward one of the tunnel entrances. 3 juvenile shadow maws were released to follow them. Alex watched in horror as the young predators stalked the terrified children through the crystal tunnels. The hunt lasted almost an hour before the juveniles cornered their prey in a dead-end cave. But instead of killing the children, the juveniles simply roared triumphantly and drove them back to the cages. Alex realized this was just practice. The real hunting lessons wouldn't begin until tomorrow. The children were being kept alive to provide multiple training sessions. As the complex settled down for the night, Alex began planning his approach. He had identified the guard patterns, mapped the layout, and located all the prisoners. Now he needed to figure out how to rescue 47 children from the most heavily defended location in Shadow Maw territory. The plan that formed in his mind was completely insane. It relied on split-second timing, perfect execution, and a lot of luck. Any rational person would have called it suicide. But Alex Rodriguez had never been accused of being completely rational. As his grandmother always said, sometimes you had to be a little crazy to do the right thing. He began moving toward the complex as the moons reached their highest point in the sky. In a few hours, he would either be a hero or he would be dead. But 47 innocent children were counting on him, and that was all the motivation he needed. Alex Rodriguez crouched behind a crystal formation just outside the Shadow Maw breeding complex, his communication device crackling with static as he tried to establish contact with the Valari survivors. After several attempts, a weak signal finally came through. "This is Elder Thessarian," came the familiar, gentle voice. "Who is this?" "Elder. This is Staff Sergeant Rodriguez of the Earth Forces. I'm here to rescue your children." There was a long pause. "Sergeant Rodriguez, you should not be here. The Shadow Maws will kill you." "Maybe," Alex replied quietly. "But I'm not leaving without your kids. I need your help with something that's going to sound crazy." Alex quickly explained what he had observed over the past day. The Shadow Maws followed rigid behavioral patterns, but they were still too numerous and too powerful to fight directly. He needed a way to create chaos and confusion that would give him a chance to reach the cages. "I've been studying Shadow Maw biology," Alex continued. "They're pack hunters with a complex social hierarchy based on aggression and dominance. What I need is something that would make them turn on each other instead of focusing on guarding the prisoners." Thessarian was quiet for a moment. "You're thinking of a pheromone that would trigger aggressive behavior?" "Exactly. Something that would make them see each other as threats or competitors instead of packmates." "Sergeant Rodriguez," Thessarian said slowly, "the Valari have spent centuries developing medicines to heal and help. We have never created anything designed to cause violence or harm." Alex understood the ethical problem. The Valari were peaceful by nature and philosophy. Asking them to create something that would cause violence went against everything they believed in. "Elder, I know what I'm asking goes against your principles," Alex said. "But those children are going to die tomorrow. The Shadow Maws are planning. Hunting lessons that the kids won't survive. Sometimes the only way to protect innocence is to make hard choices. There was another long pause. Alex could hear quiet conversation in the background as the Thessarian discussed the situation with other survivors. "What exactly do you need?" the Thessarian finally asked. Alex felt a surge of relief. "I need a pheromone compound that will make shadow moths become aggressive toward each other. It has to be something I can distribute throughout the breeding complex without being detected. And it needs to last long enough to create sustained chaos, but not so long that it affects the children." "How would you distribute such a compound?" Alex pulled out his tactical planning notes. "I've identified 7 key air circulation points in the complex. If I can place aerosol dispensers at those locations, the natural air currents will spread the pheromone throughout the entire facility within 30 minutes. That is actually a sound plan from a biological perspective," the Thessarian admitted. "Shadow moths have an extremely sensitive sense of smell. A properly designed pheromone would affect their behavior much more powerfully than it would affect other species." "Can you make it?" the Thessarian sighed. "The Valari medical knowledge includes detailed studies of aggression hormones in various species. We learned about them so we could develop treatments to reduce violence and promote peace. With some modifications, we could create what you need." "How long would it take?" 6 hours to synthesize the compound. Another 2 hours to prepare it, in aerosol form. "But Sergeant Rodriguez, you must understand. Once this pheromone is released, the shadow moths will become extremely dangerous. They will attack anything that moves, including you and the children." Alex had already thought about that problem. "The pheromone will make them aggressive toward each other, right? Not specifically toward other species?" "Correct. It mimics the chemical signals that shadow moths release when challenging for dominance. They will perceive any other shadow moth as a rival that must be defeated. Then I'll time the release for when the guards are at maximum distance from the prisoners. During the shift change at dawn, there's a 15-minute window when most guards are moving between positions. If I trigger the pheromone then, they'll be focused on fighting each other instead of watching the cages. And how will you protect the children during the chaos?" Alex smiled grimly. "That's the crazy part of the plan. I'm going to get them out while the shadow moths are busy trying to kill each other." The Thessarian was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice carried deep sadness. "Sergeant Rodriguez, what you are asking us to do violates our deepest beliefs. But our children are more important than our philosophy. We will create your pheromone." "Elder, I know this is hard for your people, but you're not creating a weapon, you're creating a rescue tool. The goal isn't to hurt the shadow moths, it's to save your children." "I understand the distinction," the Thessarian replied, "and I pray that our ancestors will forgive us for this choice." Over the next several hours, Alex remained hidden near the complex while the Valari worked to create the pheromone compound. He used the time to refine his plan, studying the guard rotations and identifying the exact timing he would need. The breeding complex operated on a precise schedule based on the movement of the moons. Guard changes happened at regular intervals, with brief gaps in coverage during the transitions. Alex calculated that he would have exactly 17 minutes to place all 7 dispensers and reach the first group of prisoners before the pheromone took full effect. As dawn approached, the Thessarian contacted him again. "The compound is ready. Sergeant Rodriguez. We have prepared 7 aerosol dispensers as requested. Each one will release the pheromone over a 30-minute period once activated." "How do I activate them?" "Simple pressure switches. Press the top button and step away. Quickly. The aerosol will begin dispersing immediately. Alex felt his heart rate increase. This was it, the point of no return. Elder, if this doesn't work, I want you to know that I tried my best. Sergeant Rodriguez, Thessarian said quietly, you are doing something that the greatest powers in the galaxy declared impossible. Whatever happens, you have already given our children hope. That alone makes you a hero in the eyes of every Valari. I'm no hero, Alex replied. I'm just a soldier who doesn't know when to quit. A small delivery drone appeared near Alex's position, carrying a package containing the 7 dispensers. Each device was about the size of a hand grenade with a simple activation switch on top. Alex strapped them to his equipment belt and checked his gear one final time. The cloaking device was fully charged. His mechanical tools were all in working order. His climbing gear was secure. Most importantly, his grandmother's old compass, the one she had carried during her military service, was safely tucked in his chest pocket. Alex looked up at the breeding complex, where 47 innocent children were sleeping in crystal cages, unaware that their rescue was about to begin. In less than an hour, he would either be leading them to safety or he would be dead. But as his grandmother always said, you couldn't let fear stop you from doing what was right. And rescuing children from monsters was definitely the right thing to do, no matter how dangerous it might be. Alex Rodriguez activated his cloaking device and began his descent into the Shadow Maw breeding complex just as the first moon reached its lowest point in the sky. The guard change would begin in exactly 12 minutes, giving him a narrow window to place the pheromone dispensers before the new shift took their positions. He moved like a ghost through the crystal formations, using every piece of cover available. The dispensers on his belt felt heavier than they should, but Alex knew that was just his nerves. Everything depended on the next 20 minutes going exactly according to plan. The first dispenser location was an air vent carved into the crystal wall near the main entrance. Alex reached it without being detected and pressed the activation switch. The device began releasing an invisible cloud of pheromone that would slowly spread through the complex's air circulation system. 6 more to go. Alex moved to the second location, a natural air shaft that connected to the juvenile training areas. As he placed the dispenser, he heard the sound of approaching footsteps. An adult Shadow Maw was coming around the corner, following its patrol route exactly on schedule. Alex pressed himself against the crystal wall and held his breath. The cloaking device would hide him from sight, but it couldn't mask sound or smell. The massive predator walked past less than 3 feet away, its yellow eyes scanning the area for any sign of intruders. After what felt like an eternity, the Shadow Maw continued on its patrol. Alex activated the second dispenser and moved toward location 3. The third and fourth dispensers went into place without incident. Alex was making good time, but he could see the guards beginning to shift positions in the distance. The window was closing faster than he had hoped. Location 5 was the most dangerous. It was positioned near the central arena where several guards maintained constant watch. Alex had to time his approach perfectly, waiting for the exact moment when all the guards were looking in other directions. He made his move during a brief distraction when one of the juvenile Shadow Maws stumbled during a training exercise. While the adult guards focused on correcting the young predator's form, Alex slipped in and activated the 5th dispenser. Locations 6 and 7 were positioned near the prisoner-holding areas. Alex could see the Valari children in their crystal cages as he worked. Some were sleeping, exhausted by terror and captivity. Others sat awake, staring into the darkness with their large, frightened eyes. Alex activated the 6th dispenser and was moving toward the final location when disaster struck. A massive alpha Shadow Maw, even larger than the breeding leader Alex had observed earlier, stepped out from behind a crystal formation. This creature was enormous, nearly 14 feet tall, with scars covering its black scales. Its yellow eyes fixed on Alex's position, with terrifying intelligence. The cloaking device should have made Alex invisible, but somehow this ancient predator had detected him anyway. Maybe it was the slight shimmer of bent light, or a scent the device couldn't mask, or simply the instincts of a creature that had survived countless battles. Alex froze, hoping the Shadow Maw might lose interest and move on. Instead, the massive creature tilted its head and made a low, growling sound that seemed to come from deep in its chest. The Alpha Shadow Maw began stalking toward Alex's position, moving with the fluid grace of a born killer. Alex realized he had two choices: run and hope the creature lost interest, or stand his ground and try to bluff his way through the encounter. Running would mean abandoning the mission and leaving the children to die. Alex made his choice. He held, perfectly still, as the Alpha Shadow Maw approached. The creature's head was now less than 2 feet from Alex's position, its massive jaws close enough that Alex could feel its breath through his protective suit. The Shadow Maw's nostrils flared. As it tried to identify the strange scent it had detected, Alex could see every detail of the creature's face: the sharp teeth that could bite through steel, the intelligent eyes that showed far more awareness than any simple predator should possess, the scars that told stories of battles won against impossible odds. For a moment that lasted forever, human and Shadow Maw stared at each other across an invisible barrier. Alex found himself wondering what the creature was thinking. Did it see him as prey, as a threat, or as something else entirely? Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Alpha Shadow Maw stepped back and made a sound that almost seemed like curiosity rather than aggression. It looked at Alex for another few seconds, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crystal maze as silently as it had arrived. Alex remained motionless for several minutes, his heart pounding so hard. He was sure the sound would attract every Shadow Maw in the complex. When he was certain the Alpha was gone, he moved toward the 7th and final dispenser location. By the time Alex activated the last dispenser, the pheromone from the first devices was already beginning to take effect. He could hear restless growling from various parts of the complex as the Shadow Maws started to become more aggressive and territorial. Alex checked his watch. The pheromone would reach full potency in about 10 minutes. He needed to be in position near the first group of prisoners when that happened. He was moving toward the cages containing the youngest children when the chaos began. It started with a roar of challenge from somewhere near the main entrance. Another roar answered from the opposite side of the complex. Within seconds, the entire breeding ground was filled with the sounds of Shadow Maws calling out territorial claims and dominance challenges. Alex watched in amazement as his plan unfolded. Adult Shadow Maws abandoned their guard posts to face rivals they suddenly perceived as threats. Juveniles snarled at their trainers and siblings. The complex's rigid hierarchy dissolved into a free-for-all as every Shadow Maw tried to establish dominance over every other Shadow Maw. The first actual fight broke out near the training area when 2 adult males met while abandoning their posts. They crashed together with a sound like thunder, their claws sparking against each other as they grappled for position. More fights erupted throughout the complex. The carefully maintained order of the breeding ground collapsed as 300 Shadow Maws suddenly decided they all needed to prove who was strongest. Alex used the chaos to his advantage, moving quickly toward the cages while the guards were distracted by their sudden need to fight each other. The plan was working better than he had dared to hope. But as he reached the first group of prisoners, Alex realized he had a new problem. The Valari children were terrified by the sounds of battle raging around them. They huddled in their cages, too frightened to understand that rescue had arrived. Alex deactivated his cloaking device and approached the nearest cage. Inside, 3 young Valari looked up at him with their large, frightened eyes. "It's okay," Alex said softly, trying to project calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "I'm here to take you home." The lock on the cage was simple enough. Just a mechanical device that Alex was able to pick with his tools. But when he opened the door, the children didn't move. "Come on," Alex urged. "We need to go now." The youngest Valari, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old, shook her head and pressed herself against the back of the cage. Alex realized that after days of captivity and terror, the children were too scared to trust anyone, even a rescuer. He was going to have to do something to calm them down before he could get them to safety. Around them, the battle between shadow maws was intensifying. Crystal formations cracked and shattered as massive bodies crashed into them. The air filled with roars of rage and the sound of claws on crystal. Alex knelt down in front of the cage and began to sing softly, an old lullaby his grandmother had taught him when he was small. It was about a little star that guided lost travelers home through the darkness. Something about the gentle melody seemed to reach through the children's fear. The youngest Valari looked at Alex with curiosity instead of terror, and slowly, carefully, she began to crawl toward the cage door. The soft melody of Alex's grandmother's lullaby seemed to create a bubble of calm in the middle of the chaos. The youngest Valari child reached out tentatively and touched Alex's outstretched hand with her small, furry fingers. Her touch was warm and gentle, and Alex felt a surge of protective determination. "That's it," Alex whispered, continuing to sing softly. "You're safe now. I'm going to take you home to your family." One by one, the 3 children crept out of their cage. They stayed close to Alex, pressing against his legs as the sounds of fighting shadow maws echoed through the crystal formations around them. Alex quickly moved to the next cage, using his tools to free 4 more children. The lullaby continued to work its magic, giving the terrified youngsters something peaceful to focus on instead of the violence surrounding them. As Alex worked through the first group of cages, he began to notice something strange. The Valari children weren't just afraid. They seemed to be experiencing some kind of emotional pain that went beyond simple fear. Several of them were making soft crying sounds that had nothing to do with their own situation. "What's wrong?" Alex asked the oldest child in the group, a young Valari who looked to be about 12 years old. "Are you hurt?" The child looked up at Alex with tears in her large eyes. "The big dark ones," she said in a small voice. "They hurt so much inside. We can feel their pain." Alex paused in his lock-picking. "You can feel the shadow maw's emotions?" "Yes," the child whispered. "Valari children are very sensitive to feelings. The dark ones aren't just angry. They're sad and scared and hurting. Something bad happened to them a long time ago." Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool air in the crystal caverns. "What kind of bad thing?" "Something changed them," another child said. "Made them angry all the time. Made them want to hurt others because they hurt so much inside." Alex freed the last child from the first group and began leading them toward the tunnel system he had identified as an escape route. But the children's words kept echoing in his mind. What if the shadow maws weren't just natural predators? What if something had been done to them? As they moved through the tunnels, Alex could hear the fighting intensifying behind them. The pheromone was working exactly as planned, keeping the Shadow Maws focused on each other instead of hunting for escaped prisoners. They reached a junction where Alex had to choose between two paths. One led toward the second group of cages, where more children waited to be rescued. The other led toward the exit and relative safety. "Stay here and stay quiet," Alex told the children. "I'll be back in a few minutes with more of your friends." Alex made his way back toward the breeding complex, moving carefully through tunnels that echoed with the sounds of battle. When he reached the second group of cages, he found that several adult Shadow Maws had taken shelter in this area, apparently trying to avoid the fighting in the main complex. These Shadow Maws weren't fighting each other. They seemed confused and distressed by the sudden aggression of their packmates. Alex watched from hiding as one of them paced back and forth, making soft, whimpering sounds that seemed completely out of character for a deadly predator. Alex had to get closer to reach the cages, but that meant risking detection by creatures that could tear him apart in seconds. He activated his cloaking device and began moving slowly toward the imprisoned children. He was halfway to the first cage when one of the confused Shadow Maws looked directly at him. But instead of attacking, the creature tilted its head and made a questioning sound, almost like a lost dog trying to understand what was happening around it. Alex froze, unsure what to do. The Shadow Maw took a step closer, and Alex could see something in its yellow eyes that he had never expected to find in such a deadly predator: intelligence, confusion, and what looked almost like pain. The creature was fighting against its own aggressive instincts, struggling with urges that seemed to come from outside its natural personality. Alex realized that the children's empathic abilities had revealed something important. The Shadow Maws were victims of some kind of mental manipulation or genetic alteration. Moving very slowly, Alex deactivated his cloaking device and showed himself to the confused Shadow Maw. The creature stepped back but didn't attack. Instead, it made more questioning sounds, as if asking Alex what was happening to its pack. "I don't know what was done to your people," Alex said quietly, "but I'm here to help the children. They don't deserve to die for something they didn't do." The Shadow Maw listened to Alex's words, its head tilted in concentration. After a moment, it stepped aside and gestured toward the cages with one massive claw. Alex couldn't believe what was happening, but he didn't waste the opportunity. He quickly moved to the cages and began freeing the second group of children. The confused Shadow Maw watched but didn't interfere. As Alex worked, more non-aggressive Shadow Maws appeared in the area. They seemed to be the ones who were resisting the artificial aggression programming, fighting against whatever had been done to their species. Several of them helped by opening cage locks with their claws, working alongside Alex to free the imprisoned children. "The dark ones who aren't fighting are the strong ones," one of the Valari children explained. "They're fighting the bad thing inside their heads instead of fighting each other." Alex realized he was witnessing something unprecedented: Shadow Maws actively helping to rescue their intended victims. Whatever had been done to their species, some individuals were strong enough to resist it and remember who they really were. The rescue of the second group went much faster with help from the peaceful Shadow Maws. As Alex led the children toward the tunnel system, several of the creatures followed at a distance, as if they wanted to make sure the youngsters reached safety. Alex made 2 more trips to collect the remaining children, each time assisted by Shadow Maws who had overcome their artificial programming. By the time he reached the third group, the fighting in the main complex was beginning to wind down as the pheromone started to wear off. Leading all 47 children through the tunnel system was like herding very scared, very gentle cats. The Valari youngsters stayed close together, holding hands and whispering comfort to each other in their musical language. As they neared the exit, Alex activated his emergency beacon to signal for pickup. The stealth shuttle would arrive within the hour to take the children home to their families. But Alex couldn't stop thinking about what he had learned. The Shadow Maws weren't just monsters. They were victims of some ancient crime that had turned them into killers against their will. Some of them were still fighting that programming, still trying to be the beings they had once been. As they reached the surface and waited for rescue, one of the older Valari children tugged on Alex's sleeve. "The Dark Ones who helped us," she said. "They want you to know something." "What's that?" "They remember being different, being peaceful, before the bad machines changed them." Alex looked back toward the Crimson Valleys, where confused and wounded Shadow Maws were trying to understand what had happened to their pack. He made a decision that would change everything. Instead of just calling for a rescue shuttle, Alex activated his long-range communicator and contacted Admiral Burke directly. "Admiral, I have all 47 children safe and ready for pickup," Alex reported. "But I need to request immediate medical and scientific support. We've got a much bigger situation here than anyone realized." The rescue shuttle arrived just as the first sun began to rise over the Crimson Valleys. Alex Rodriguez watched with deep satisfaction as 47 Valari children were reunited with the medical team that would take them home to their families. Each child was examined, treated for minor injuries, and wrapped in warm blankets that made them look like small, furry bundles of relief. Elder Thessarian was aboard the shuttle, and when he saw his people's children safe and alive, the dignified Valari leader broke down in tears of joy. He approached Alex with trembling hands extended in the traditional Valari gesture of gratitude. "Sergeant Rodriguez," Thessarian said, his voice thick with emotion, "you have given us back our future. How can we ever repay such a debt?" Alex shook his head. "No debt, Elder. This is what anyone should do when children are in danger." "Not anyone," Thessarian replied. "The greatest powers in the galaxy declared this mission impossible. Only a human was brave enough to attempt it." But Alex wasn't thinking about glory or recognition. His mind was focused on what he had learned in the breeding complex. As the medical team finished their work and the shuttle prepared to depart, Alex pulled Admiral Burke aside for a private conversation. "Admiral, I need to tell you something that's going to sound crazy," Alex began. "The Shadow Maws aren't what we think they are." Burke raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Alex quickly explained what the Valari children had sensed and what he had observed during the rescue. Several Shadow Maws had actively helped free the prisoners, fighting against their own aggressive programming to do what they knew was right. "You're saying the Shadow Maws are victims of some kind of mind control?" Burke asked. "Not mind control exactly," Alex replied. "More like genetic or cybernetic modification, something that enhanced their aggressive instincts and suppressed their natural personalities. The children could sense that many of them are still fighting against it." Burke was quiet for a moment. "Rodriguez, what are you asking for?" "Permission to go back down there with a medical team," Alex said. "Some of those Shadow Maws are wounded from fighting each other. They helped save the children. The least we can do is try to help them." "Alex," Burke said seriously, "you're talking about providing medical aid to the most feared predators in the galaxy. Do you have any idea how the Galactic Council will react to that?" Alex smiled grimly. "Admiral, since when do humans worry about doing the right thing just because it makes other people nervous?" Burke studied Alex's face and saw the same stubborn, Determination that had made the rescue mission possible in the first place. All right, Rodriguez, but I'm sending you down with a full diplomatic team and the best xenobiologists we have. If you're right about this, it's going to change everything we know about the Shadow Maw species. 3 hours later, Alex found himself leading a joint human-Valari medical team back into the Crimson Valleys. The Valari biotechnicians brought portable medical equipment and a deep understanding of alien biology. The human doctors brought surgical tools and a willingness to try treating patients that could kill them with one swipe of a claw. When they arrived at the breeding complex, they found a scene of devastation. Crystal formations were shattered, and wounded shadow maws lay scattered throughout the complex. The artificial aggression pheromone had worn off, leaving the creatures confused and hurt, both physically and emotionally. The same adult shadow maw that had helped Alex during the rescue approached the medical team cautiously. It was limping from wounds received during the fighting, but its yellow eyes showed intelligence and hope rather than aggression. "Can you understand me?" Alex asked the creature. The shadow maw nodded slowly and pointed to its throat, then shook its head. It could understand, but couldn't speak in any language the team recognized. Dr. Kate Lewis, the team's lead xenobiologist, began scanning the creature with her medical instruments. What she found made her gasp in surprise. "Alex, look at this," she said, showing him the scanner readout. "There are artificial neural implants throughout its brain structure, and these genetic markers suggest extensive modification of the aggression centers." Elder Thessarian, who had insisted on joining the mission, approached the wounded shadow maw with his medical scanner. "The biotechnology is ancient," he reported, "but very sophisticated. Whoever did this was trying to turn a peaceful species into perfect predators." Over the next several hours, the team treated wounded shadow maws throughout the complex. What they discovered was both horrifying and hopeful. The shadow maws had once been a peaceful, intelligent species, not unlike the Valari themselves. Thousands of years ago, an unknown alien race had captured them and used advanced biotechnology to turn them into living weapons. The genetic modifications were designed to enhance aggression, increase physical strength, and suppress higher emotions like empathy and compassion. But the original Shadow Maw personalities were still there, buried beneath layers of artificial programming. "The good news," Dr. Lewis explained to Alex, "is that the modifications aren't permanent. With the right treatment, we can reverse most of the genetic changes and remove the neural implants." "How long would that take?" Alex asked. "For one individual, maybe 6 months of treatment. For an entire species, it could take decades." Alex looked around at the wounded shadow maws who were allowing themselves to be treated by the medical team. These creatures had spent thousands of years as the galaxy's most feared predators, but underneath the artificial modifications, they were still the peaceful beings they had once been. When news of the discovery reached the Galactic Council, the reaction was exactly what Alex had expected. Some species wanted to continue treating the shadow maws as dangerous predators. Others argued for immediate medical intervention to reverse the ancient modifications. Ambassador Lisa Chen found herself defending humanity's decision to help their former enemies. "The shadow maws didn't choose to become killers," she argued, in the council chambers. "They were made into monsters against their will. If we can help them return to what they were meant to be, don't we have an obligation to try?" The debate raged for days, but eventually, the council approved a joint rehabilitation program. Volunteers from multiple species would work together to develop treatments for the Shadow Maw modifications and help them reintegrate into galactic society as peaceful beings. Alex Rodriguez became the director of the Shadow Maw Rehabilitation Project, working alongside Valari biotechnicians, human doctors, and representatives from a dozen other species. The work was slow and sometimes dangerous, but gradually, individual Shadow Maws began to recover their original personalities. The first fully rehabilitated Shadow Maw was the one who had helped Alex during the rescue. When the treatments were complete, the creature could speak again for the first time in centuries. Its first words, translated through a universal communication device, were, "Thank you for helping us remember who we really are." 6 months after the rescue mission, Alex stood in a garden on the Valari homeworld, watching former Shadow Maws and Valari children playing together. The kids had no fear of the large, gentle beings who had once been their captors. The Shadow Maws, freed from their artificial aggression, had become protective and caring toward all young beings. Elder Thessarian approached Alex as he watched the peaceful scene. "Sergeant Rodriguez, you did more than rescue our children. You saved an entire species from a fate they never deserved." Alex shook his head. "I just did what needed to be done. The real heroes are the Shadow Maws who fought against their programming, and the Valari who overcame their fear to help former enemies." "No," Thessarian said firmly. "The real hero is the human who looked at the galaxy's most feared predators and saw victims who needed help. That kind of compassion takes a special kind of courage." As Alex watched the children and former predators playing together in the garden, he thought about his grandmother's words. "Sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things. But maybe the most extraordinary thing wasn't the impossible rescue mission. Maybe it was learning to see past fear and hatred to find the suffering beings underneath." The galaxy had learned something important from the Shadow Maw crisis. Sometimes, the most dangerous creatures were the ones who needed help the most. And sometimes it took the galaxy's most stubborn and unpredictable species, humans, to refuse to accept that anyone was beyond redemption. Years later, when other species spoke of the Shadow Maw rescue, they would talk about the impossible odds and the daring mission. But Alex Rodriguez knew the real lesson was simpler. When children are in danger, you help them. When someone is suffering, you try to heal them. And when everyone else says something is impossible, sometimes you just have to prove them wrong. After all, that's what humans do.